Today's mountain cattlemen and their families are descendants of pioneers who hold a special place in Australia's story. When the Enterprise arrived on the Yarra River in August 1835 to mark the birth of Melbourne, mountain cattlemen, much to the surprise of later explorers, were already established in Victoria's high country, quietly going about their business.
Interestingly, the very first Europeans into the high country of Victoria were mountain cattlemen. James McFarlane was the first. He arrived at McFarlane's Flat, just south of Kosciuszko, in 1835. Some debate that it might have been 1833, but generally it's considered 1835. O'Rourke's at Suggambuggan the same year, and Pendergast over at Benambra. And the reason that they survived in that country, in that environment, was that they were good bushmen, and good bushmen are good observers of what's about them. And they observed what the Aborigines were doing, and they noticed their fire stick farming, and that's basically how they managed the country. They continued that practice of fire stick farming. Of course, lightning ran its course, and the devastation wasn't as bad as it is today because the fuel loads were less, purely because the Aborigines burnt the ground and lightning ran its course.
They followed centuries of British and European farming traditions by grazing their stock in the mountains during spring and summer. The early cattlemen were free to graze the high country without regulation, but later governments put in place a system of licences allowing designated families access to defined areas.
My name's Graham Stoney. I'm a mountain cattleman. I'm 69. Our family have run cattle on the high plains for many, many years. We lost our main run in 2005, which was on the Bluff. I've still got a small state forest lease where I run about 40 cattle, and our family's been devastated by the loss of their main run. There's been some dramatic effects on the environment. Fires of 2007 came through that area and didn't burn that hot except in a couple of places, including our hut, which we turned around and rebuilt as a matter of principle, even though we'd lost our run. Generally, where the fires came, it came up to where it had been formerly grazed, which was only a couple of years before, and in a lot of places it just went out. And other places it burnt around and it wasn't too bad. But the subsequent growth where the fires did trickle around has meant that now the whole area is a time bomb, and if another fire comes through next year it will probably irreparably destroy the snow gums.
This is the result of the 06-07 fires. This particular area burnt very, very hot, extremely hot. As we can see, it's denuded all the trees, they've lost their canopy. The result is we've got an overburden of fuel here that is just waiting to burn again. If that's the case, all this succulent regrowth, this young growth, will be burned a second time. It will never grow again. We will change the face of this country forever. My contention is that this is a clear and present problem. What do we do with it? We can't fuel reduce burn it. It's too fragile. There's only one thing a practical person would do with this, would be to come and graze it.
The Esplen report reached the conclusion that grazing doesn't reduce blazing without much analysis at all. You can't say that cattle are eating grass and yet claim that they're not reducing the fuel load. Fire is largely a consequence of fuel load. So where the cattle have grazed, certainly the fuel loads are less, and all the scientific data says that. And there are plots that have been established since 1986, and within those plots the fire burnt with greater intensity and with more uniformity than it did outside that plot. So I don't think the Esplen report is right in reaching that conclusion.
One of the big problems we have in Victoria, I think, at the moment is the Esplen inquiry. I think it's just a travesty of an inquiry. Its processes were improper, and its conclusions were improper. Its structure was improper, and everything is being put back onto that as our guiding star.
If you had to sum up the Esplin report in one word, what would you say?
It's not a word I think I would want to use in public.
This little area here where you see my horses is an area where we have our lunch on some of our trips. This area I particularly fenced off and made my horses and left them there to graze while we had lunch, and this is the end result. Still quite young, green, absolutely would not burn through the fire season. That's your possibility with managed grazing. That's the situation we've seen before with no management at all. This is another spot on the Howker River, only 200 metres or so down from the last shot we done at the toilet block in the camping ground. As you can see, no heavy fuel load here at all. The reason for that is, in the middle of January, as we were taking our cattle to our summer grazing leases on the Upper Jamison River, we camped 100 head of cattle here for one night. In the last month or 3 weeks, that same 100 head have come back through here, grazed this and kept on their way. You can see the end result. It's about the same as mowing that little spot up there.
On the 27th of November this year, Victorians will vote as to who is to be their next government. If we win at this next election, the Liberal National Coalition will return the cattlemen to the high country. We will have the grazing happen in the high country. This is an issue, first and foremost, about making sure we as a state do everything we can to contest the inevitable threat of bushfires. The worry in the Alpine National Park regions is we are going to cop a mega fire in the nature of those that we've seen only about 12 months ago. Who would have thought almost 12 months have gone since the Gippsland Black Saturday fires? If we are going to do everything as a state to make sure we accommodate the threat of any such event happening again, we must as a state prepare comprehensively across the state to make certain as best we can that does not happen. Cattle grazing reduces the way in which fires burn. There is no doubt that it does it. It doesn't stop the fires, but what it does is reduce the fuel available to those fires. We need the cattle grazing to happen, and if we win on the 27th of November this year, the Liberal National Coalition will return the cattle grazing to where it should be and from whence it should never have been removed in the first place. Thank you.
Now for 2010, it's an election year. The MCAV needs you all to help. We need to retain our heritage, and our agenda is to put cattle back on our runs. As we've heard, we've got opposition support on that one. We want to put them back as part of a well-managed high country management plan. The grazing plan is to produce green food, healthy food in other words, without land degradation such as salinity or reducing our water yield or quality. Our grazing assists in fuel reduction, and that reduces fire intensity, which reduces environmental devastation.